Yeah, thanks, Mark. A lot of excitement, a lot of anticipation here at the testing grounds today. The 13th episode is about to begin and the stadium is filled to capacity. I'm joined by the captain of the home side, and Santosh, what are your thoughts about the weather as we head into this momentous episode?
Yeah, Lavi, it is a tricky situation, especially this being the 13th episode. Lots of rain and a lot of superstition around, but we are confident about our performance. Our prayers are for the electricity department for no power cuts.
So, what has been your preparation strategy for such an ungodly episode number?
Yeah, we are making sure there are no black cats coming into the recording studio, and also we have made sure we ordered enough garlic garlands to be put on, the chairs and the mic so that the boys will play well.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the ThyGap Thursdays. Why ThyGap Thursdays? Because we launch a new episode every Thursday. I am your host, Being Brut, and with me, the absolutely inconsequential host of mine,
Bogus Noog.
Bogus Noog. How are you, Bogus Noog?
I'm doing great, Brut. What's going on with you?
So this is Thursday.
Yeah.
So you seem to be in good light, good moods, good energies.
Of course, like every time.
Yeah. So it's brilliant to have you here. Mm-hmm. So tell me, how's your week?
Just like any other week, a lot of work, a lot of scrambling around to make sure we are going by our timelines for the podcast. The delivery.
I know. I mean, our diligent discipline.
All of that professional stuff.
The professionalism.
Oh yeah.
Though we are recording it on Friday, but anyways, congrats to you, by the way.
Thank you.
And I want you to reciprocate the same.
Congrats to you, Brut.
750 downloads.
750, the big 750.
And also importantly, today is the 13th episode.
Yeah.
What's the relevance of 13, Mr. Bogus Noog?
It's unlucky.
Yes, not for us, but...
Not for us, yeah.
Because we started off from unlucky, so where else can we go?
Exactly.
Right?
Can't get any worse.
Intense 12 episodes that went by. Mm-hmm. Great response.
Oh, yeah.
So before we go any further,
right.
I just want to speak to the audience for a while. So I want you to shut up your mouth.
Please.
Okay. So guys, welcome to the 13th episode, the unlucky number. But that shouldn't stop you from following us on Instagram @_ThyGap. Then you can also follow us on Twitter @ThyGap. And come on, Facebook. Everybody, like us on Facebook and share us on Facebook. @ThyGap it is. Okay? I hope you do that right now. Yeah. Don't get number 13 affect you or influence you in any way.
Yeah, if you follow us today at the 13th episode, you're breaking a jinx.
Yes.
You make it lucky now.
Yes. And also, the curse that we put on you, that will go off. If you share it with like 13 people.
Yeah, of course.
So, Bogus.
Yo.
The 13th episode, man. We did a great job, right?
So far, yeah.
So far, so good. 12 different topics. Few of them repeated, got too long, became 2 parts.
Yeah.
Where do you think we lagged? Where do you think we went too far?
I think we haven't gone far enough. I think we're just getting started.
Yeah, I think we are warming up.
Oh, yeah.
But we handle a lot of, pushback about the length of the podcast.
Yeah, but this is not even our final form yet.
I mean, there is no ceiling for perfection when it comes to you and me, especially. Morely towards me.
We just keep pushing.
Yeah, we keep pushing. But anyways, Bogus.
You're
being quite awesome nowadays.
Right.
I think you have something to tell us.
I have...
Wow, that was something that you told us and it is absolutely inconsequential.
Wait, I'm taking a Vajpayee pause. A story to say.
Intense. So, are you telling me that the episode is about storytelling?
Once upon a time, Brut, there existed an absolute idiot called Brut.
Enough said, let me take over. Storytelling.
Okay.
You know?
That's not so bad.
Yeah. I mean, you know how much we the amount of stuff that we speak, right, in general, is so kind of haphazard that we overall at the end of the day we kind of make a story out of it, right? We say like, oh, so this is how it's going to be, right?
Even when we're not consciously trying to, also it turns out to
be
ends
like
up being
true
a story thing. Yeah.
So I was just thinking that, okay, why is storytelling so important, firstly, right? But before I go any further into it, I just want to put it right out there that let's discuss about storytelling as an art in itself or as a skill in itself.
Sure.
And I want your help here. So can you tell me, Mr. Bogus Nuke, right off the bat, what is a story for you? What is storytelling for you?
Storytelling for me is, there's a clear, as a listener, from my perspective, there's a clear beginning and there's progression. I understand there is progression and there is an end. And in the middle, I'm being made to wonder about where the story is going, or I'm surprised by the turn of events, or I'm just following a series of events as they're being explained to me.
Right.
And they're making sense to me, the logical progression of how they're being explained as well.
Right.
So on a very basic level, that's what I think of as a story.
So basically, you're going by the conventional definition, right? There's a beginning.
Yeah.
Then there's a progression.
Yeah.
That is, it has ups and downs or some kind of a surprise element.
Right.
Or some kind of a revelation or inspirational moment. And then it kind of ideally goes to a happy ending.
Well, not always.
It's not necessary. Okay.
Yeah.
But it has like an ending. Like, okay, this is where the story stops. Right. Great. So for me, I was thinking about it, and it so happened that I looked at storytelling as a completely different way.
Yeah.
I mean, I realized as I was thinking that it is mostly about two things, right? It is one about experience. Storytelling is all about, I'm talking as a person who's telling a story, or actually even as a person who's listening to a story, right?
Let's break it down. Start with the
As a
perspective
listener.
as the storyteller.
As a storyteller, as a storyteller, it's about an experience that I had.
Right.
Right. And when I look at it that way, as to, hey, this was the story. For example, say you ask me, okay, fine, dude, why did you end up buying this watch?
Yeah.
Right. It can be as simple question as that, right? Why do you like a watch or anything?
Yeah.
And then there's this whole build up in my head of how I boil down to that specific point.
Right.
Right. So I might start off with, hey, I was looking out for something like this because I saw it at one of the wedding or whatever, somebody was wearing it.
Yeah.
And I got curious that, hey, I also want it. And then, I didn't find it because I only wanted that specific thing.
Yeah.
So I start telling you the whole journey of my experience, right? Of that point.
Right.
So it is always, from a storyteller's perspective, the more closely you experience it or the more closer it is to your experience, the better the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course.
Because you're living it, it gets easier.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing is, which is a mixture of heavy empathy and observation.
Okay.
There are some people who have the tendency of learning things faster by just looking at it.
Learning from other people's
experiences, right? So it's basically they are like pseudo living their experience.
Right.
Somebody else's experience, and they somehow, get the juice out of the experience and are able to like kind of live it themselves.
Yeah.
So the second thing about a storyteller's perspective is, how do I put across something which was an observation, right? Which is also in a way an experience for me that, hey, I observed a dog like barking or saving something.
Right.
And how do I put across that? So those are the ways I look at storytelling, right? It primarily lives on the foundation principles of your experience.
Okay.
And from a listener's perspective, it's basically the observational skill again, right?
But
it's like,
I have a question.
Yeah.
What happens when, as a storyteller, you're not really narrating from your experience, but you're narrating a third party experience? It could be like, in example, our last episode, Rules of Engagement, where we talked about Dostoevsky and what happened in his life.
Right.
And guys, please check that out. The whole story is on there.
Right.
So how does it change from your perspective as a storyteller when you're narrating someone else's?
That's where I bring in the concept of observational empathy, right?
Okay.
In the sense, like, I listen to a story or I read a story or I watch a movie, and there always comes a tipping point, according to me, right? Where the story is no more an observation, it suddenly becomes your experience.
Okay.
I mean, for example, if you're watching something inspirational or something which is really, really, in your zone or your like, or say in your category of likingness.
In
right?
your wheelhouse.
In your
as they
wheelhouse.
say.
Yeah. Again, spoken English class. Stop doing that.
We don't really use that term.
Broken my flow.
Right. Go ahead.
Okay. But taking it from the top, like when you see something which you are super interested in, then what happens is after a point, you're not just seeing it or observing it. You're making that mental math about how you're going to use it, at some point.
Yeah.
Or you start relating to it at some point. You go into your past, or probably you dig out something or anything of that sort.
Also,
right?
if the character happens to be going through some stress or anxiety in the story,
Yeah.
as a listener, you also, or as a storyteller also, you're trying to convey the same. You're being empathetic, right?
True.
And
True.
you're trying
There
to
is that
convey-
element of relatability, right?
Right.
From your individual standpoint to a fictional thing or from a third party thing.
Yeah.
Right. For example, imagine somebody tells that, dude, I went for a roller coaster ride and it was so horrible, I got nauseous. And they explain this little practical physical elements of it.
Yeah.
And you stick on to them. And you're getting gutted in your stomach, or you're getting butterflies, and you're like, oh dude, you got nauseous. I can imagine how it was.
Yeah.
And you instantly kind of live that, right? It kind of becomes so, same thing like somebody gets like a very bad injury, right? Say somebody gets a bad, gash or what do you call that? Like a cut on their hand,
Right.
and there's blood coming out.
Yeah.
You instantly kind of see it, and you're feeling the pain in a way, right?
Yeah.
So it's when it becomes a third person story, that's what should happen. That's what ideally happens to you. If it's a good story, if it's a good storyteller,
Right.
then that's what happens. And that becomes your experience more than just an observation or a third party story.
Yeah.
So that's how that's what I boiled down to recently, saying that, hey, this is what it is. It's about experience. It is about what we observe is what our stories are made of, and
Right.
like, you famously say, or conveniently, quote somebody else's saying,
Yeah.
like stories come from real life and art imitates real
Oh
life
yeah.
and real life
Art imitates life, imitates art.
Correct.
It's a
right?
cycle.
So that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
I feel, experiences is what makes it all the more believable. Or a good story is based on it's like a good lie is as close to a truth.
Right.
Same thing is a good story is always the closest to the real experience.
So how do you see it from the perspective of a listener now?
A good story?
Just the effect of storytelling, or,
Well, I only wait for the time where it invokes certain amount of emotions in me, right? A good story always makes me feel organically empathetic.
okay.
It shouldn't be forced. It should be organic.
Right.
I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Sometimes it is like, you're just saying like, oh yeah, I can imagine. But you don't really feel it, right? You say
Yeah.
it so that the storyteller kind of feels, yeah.
Shouldn't be exploitative.
Yeah.
Sanjay Leela.
So for me, it is a very organic reaction. Anything that is giving me an organic reaction,
Right.
not orgasmic, but
Exactly.
organic.
I mean, that too,
the
depending
subtle
on the
difference.
scenario.
Very thin line.
Yeah, sometimes
Right.
you may want the other thing as well.
Sometimes,
Yeah,
but
sometimes.
I'm married, so I don't need it as often as you. But you know what I'm saying? Organic reactions. That's what I'm looking at as a listener.
Yeah.
Right? A good story, I simply define a good story when I organically kind of feel it, or I'm giving reactions without really thinking too much about it. And it can be any reaction, right? I'm not necessarily saying that it is a predefined reaction or there are only these set of reactions that I have to give. Any reaction which catches me by surprise is for me an organic reaction.
Now, is this also the answer to the same question that you asked me before? What is a story according to you? Or do you have a different answer for that?
It is the same answer, more
Okay.
or less.
Okay.
Anything which for me gives a reaction is a story in my head.
Okay.
It's no more, it's no more a statement, or it's just somebody's, I don't know how do I put it. Actually, a good question.
Maybe we can come back to it.
Yeah,
But
probably in the end.
what I want to ask you now, Brut, is for a person who's listening to this, and they don't really, they were never really aware of the prevalence of storytelling in our everyday lives,
Right.
or they don't think in terms of story. They don't think like they should, convey or project themselves in form of story to others. For example, if they could be selling a startup, pitching a startup idea,
Right.
or they could be going to an interview. So what do you have to say to people who maybe are not so aware of
Yeah.
this aspect? Why is it important? Why do you want them to pay attention to this?
Well, to start, I'll answer the first part of the question,
Okay.
which is what will I tell to people who are going to an interview or pitching a startup idea or whatever.
Right. Let's take
It
that.
might be a little complicated to understand, but probably my suggestion, which I also try to follow in my own personal life, is tell a story.
Right.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Let's dig a little bit into that. Interview.
Yeah. Okay. So
Brut, thanks for coming to this interview today.
right.
Why don't you start off by telling me something about yourself?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me.
Sure.
It was very kind of you. And to give you a brief of myself, I come from a family of engineers.
Okay.
Right. My father is an engineer. I live in a joint family. So all the men predominantly are engineers, including my sister. And so hence I had to do engineering, not by choice, but by force. I initially had my interests in literature and psychology. But anyways, the moment I was at the brink of finishing my engineering degree. I realized that I was not having the aptitude or the appetite for academia.
Okay.
So I didn't look at further education, but I wanted, because I was good at doing things, having things on hand. So I decided to do a job. And I had a certain set of skills that I naturally had, out of which one was writing content. So immediately, I started searching for jobs where I can use that natural skill of mine and see how I can monetize it. So that's how I started my professional career. Where after content writing, I went to online marketing, because that was the time where, Facebook just came into the picture and everybody was using Facebook as a platform to do branding. And at that point, it was just about money, right? Because I was just 23, 24. So my focus was to be more financially independent. So it was just like one job to another, which was paying me better and also helping me learn a little about what I was doing and blah, blah, blah. I can't I won't go into the whole story, but you know what I meant, right?
Break it down now. What were you trying to do there, and why did you choose to answer that question the way you did?
Yeah. So the simple thing is, first of all, you're in an interview.
Yes.
So you are in a competitive environment, right? You are competing against, say, another 30, 40 candidates who are waiting outside the room.
Or more.
But I'm giving like an average number. In a day, if each interview is for like 20 minutes, each round, then you're talking about one person interviewing at max of 30 to 40 people.
In this country, 30 to 40 people is the queue to the toilet.
Yeah, I mean, that's the average number you'll find
There's a whole
at a
lot
restaurant's
more competition
bathroom.
going on with interviews.
Right. Good point, actually.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
You have like 30, 40 people around who are waiting outside trying to beat you at the interview.
Exactly.
And there is always, it's a safe assumption that in terms of skill, not all of them are very, very this thing. You'll always have those 30% of the people waiting outside who might have the same amount of skill that you have.
Yeah.
In terms of the job requirement.
You can assume the 80-20 separation.
Pareto law, right?
Yeah.
So say 20% of them have the same kind of skill. You're talking about at least around 10 more people waiting outside who have the same amount of skill.
Right.
So how do you sell your skill better? It's all about packaging.
How do you appear as a bigger, better person?
So my concept always revolved around, how do I make the person get interested in me?
As an individual.
As an individual. So he should see me as a person, not just a guy who can do his job.
Not as head count or as the
as a commodity.
Commodity, or as they call it in corporate circles, resource.
Yeah, which is so demeaning. I mean, like, it's like, I don't know, you're almost kind of compared to a coal or something like that. Like, it's like, how much of gas do we have at home? What are the resources at home?
Yeah.
Like, we have like 2 cylinders.
But you're saying, for you to stand out as an individual. That's what you were saying.
Yeah, it's basically like, what is the value prop I get onto the table, right? And I'm just an entrepreneur in a way. I'm selling myself, and
You're the product.
I'm the product. So how do I build a story to the product? If I just tell that, hey, I'm a BTech grad from, who had his majors in electrical and electronics, and then I did I worked in different companies where I started my career in content writing, and then I came here.
Right.
Then I'm basically giving him more reason to not dig deep into me. I want the person to know me more.
You're giving him details that lakhs of other prospective candidates could also give him. Hey, I did engineering.
Right.
Hey, I did this college.
So how do I just step out a little from the norm?
Yeah.
And yet give what the interviewer wants.
Yeah.
Right. And that is storytelling. Right. And what happens in a storytelling is, now suddenly the person who's interviewing you is, your intention rather, at least, is to make that person go through what you're going, and make him realize in a way that, okay, fine, how important is this job for him? Right? Or how is he looking at this job? Is it just another, is this just another fill in the blanks for him? Or does this guy, is this guy trying to bring something more to the table?
Value.
Right? And I want him to see me as a person, not just as you mentioned, like resource,
right,
in a certain terminology,
right,
but also a person who will represent the organization.
Yeah.
Right. And the interviewer should feel that, hey, tomorrow when this guy goes and tells that he is a part of my organization, I bet he's going to put the organization in a good picture.
Right.
Right. He'll paint that picture to them, to people outside, better. So he's technically my ambassador. He's my brand ambassador.
Just
right?
the positive impression that this individual creates with their personality, their behavior, and their conduct, it rubs off on the organization.
Right. And what I'm also looking at is, because I'm of a certain caliber, not just in terms of skill set, but also in terms of a certain personality trait kind of a thing.
Right.
What the interviewer can safely assume is, hey, if this guy can get more guys like him, so he's my window, or my doorway to getting more guys like him to represent my organization. Right. And it so happens that obviously in an interview, you have processes, right? You have different steps.
Right.
So you want the story to continue till the top brass.
Okay.
Right.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
And you can come back to this after you're done, in case I interrupted you with something. But my question is, the way you started off with that answer, tell me tell me something about yourself.
Yeah.
And the way you built a story around the personal aspect.
Yeah.
For you to stand out as an individual. I think that someone else listening to this may be able to relate to that on some level.
Right.
And it may be a little bit easier to pick up on.
Right.
But then what about the aspect where I have to talk about my core competency as a professional?
Right.
So let's just take some profession, for example, say sales.
Got it.
How do you build a story? Now you're done building a story around you as an individual.
A person, right. About what my career was.
How do you build a story around the job aspect or the core competency aspect now?
So it's very simple. So primarily what you have done in the first question about tell me about yourself is you set the premise of there is a protagonist or there is a lead who's basically you, who's leading the story.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And you are trying to give a characteristic of that person.
Yeah.
Right. So you are telling him he took these decisions. So for the fact that, hey, when I was at the end of my engineering, the final year of my engineering, where everybody was doing GRE and planning to do further studies.
What was your engineering in again?
Electrical and electronics.
Gee.
It's ridiculous. But hey,
that's the same thing.
all the AAA guys out there, dude, tough luck, man. We are the most downtrodden guys.
I'm right there with you.
You're also AAA, right? Sweet Lord.
Yeah.
So you know what we go through.
Yeah.
But anyways, so when you do that, right, you tell a certain amount of, you kind of let the person go into how you make a decision. So what I did there was, hey, I didn't have the appetite to do for the studies, right? And whatever might be the reason, that is what has happened. Now, having said that, I knew that I want to have a job and have a career. And my intention of having a career initially was to be financially independent at the age of 23, 24. So my priority was openly set as to why I picked up a job. And also I told that at that point I used to write a lot. So, I knew that I had this natural skill of writing. So I picked up, I monetized my natural skill.
Yeah.
Which drives back, see, again, to come to this point, right? Measure of Man, what we did last, the last
episodes, yeah.
It is important for you to also know the basic ingredients about yourself.
Yes.
Right? While you're telling a story,
Yeah.
you should be very confident, or you should be very aware, not confident, but
Aware.
I would say aware of what do you carry as your core competence as a person.
Right.
And it's not about, the job related stuff. It's about it's stuff like, what is your integrity based on? What are your core principles as a person to function? Right. What does independence mean to you? Right. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go deep. People can check out the previous episode, but you get that, right? Now coming to the point as, okay, now I have to sell why, like,
the job aspect,
the job aspect. And you said sales, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So sales. So basically you tell the understanding of the job. What I do, if say you ask, like, so what is your experience in sales, or why sales,
or why do you think you are the best fit?
Right. Why sales?
Yeah.
So I say, like, so hey, here is the thing, right? I find, first of all, sales is a very challenging role, and it's a very intangible role to evaluate somebody's competence of sales. We can never measure until and unless the performance is evaluated. Right? There is an output of sales as to how good a salesperson is. Right? That is a metric that you evaluate on. Having said that, why I'm interested in sales is I know for a fact that a lot of organizations, in general, sales is the engine, which is the connecting dot or the mediator between the company and the market. Right? I see sales as that mediating, engine that allows company to know what the market thinks about the product. And at the same time allows market to know what all products that the company has and how it benefits them.
Okay.
Right. So there's a lot of intelligent decision making that happens at sales. And that's where I get interest. That's where my interest gets generated in sales. And also, see, every company is dependent on revenue generation, and sales is one of the biggest engines for revenue generation. So you play an integral cog. You are a part of an integral cog for the company to prosper. The better the sales engine is, the better the company grows. Right. Therefore, my interest towards sales and why I want to be a sales guy, because I like to build businesses. Right. Over a period of time, I started realizing that this is where I want to be. And why I'm a good sales guy. Firstly, you can always go back to the reference of how I performed in my previous, or if this is the first sales job that you're attending, right? Then I would simply say stuff like, so sales is a science, right? Sales is about understanding the process. And that process, anybody can understand. The question comes to execution. How well you execute the process is where the magic lies in being a good sales guy. There are different tools that you use, right? Now, what does a sales guy need? He needs good listening skills. He needs to have an ear to the ground on where is a good opportunity, stuff like that. And I feel I'm the person who has that. I'm confident about having those tools. And with respect to execution of a decision or a process, my engineering, my fact that I moved away from a core engineering like electrical and got into a creative aspect like content and did well there, shows, signs of the fact that, or shows that, I'm a good execution guy. And that's the reason which gives me confidence into, applying for this position or coming into sales.
So you've used storytelling to project yourself as an individual. You've used storytelling to project your core competency.
Right.
And look good as a professional now.
Right.
As a combination of these two stories,
right,
what is the overall effect you're looking to have on the interviewer? What kind of takeaway do you want them to have as a culmination of your storytelling?
The main thing that I want the interviewer to, where I want to position an interviewer is, okay, I got a guy who's smart in putting across what he has.
Okay.
That's all it is. Ultimately, what I want is, because I'm selling, that itself is the act of selling. If it is a sales job, communication, right?
Right.
So I want the person to think that, okay, you know what, this guy can put across an idea in a smart way, right? He's not just that ordinary guy who would come to me like any other sales guy, because there are so many stereotypes with every job profile, right? If, for example, if you're a content writer or say you're a marketing guy, people expect you to come with like color pens in your pocket, or like they imagine you to be this creatively, supremely creative guy with long hair. There is a stereotype notion about every profession, right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to address that stereotype in a different way, right? I'm trying to go to the base thing. So I want the interviewer to look at me as a person that, yeah, I see this guy has the skill. Now, there are different ways he might be evaluating me. Maybe I'm not a brand fit for his company, or maybe whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what it definitely does is I make an impression of him. That's all is where my control stops. Right. I'm not trying to influence a decision directly. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make that person look at me from a perspective of, yeah, this guy can give me a lot of value. Right? I can expect him to be honest with me, or whatever is my intention. So the story always builds, like I said, the reason why I was referring to Measure of a Man is you need to know what are your core ingredients, right?
Yeah.
The moment you know that, your story will unfold in the same way.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, yes, there might be people who are listening to this who might directly relate to me, but at the same time, there will be other people who might like the more conventional way of attending an interview. That shouldn't stop them from telling a story, is what my point is.
Okay.
You still go with the convention. You can't really force anybody into like picking one way or the other.
Yeah.
But try telling a story. What storytelling does to you is something that I can tell, because it gives you a better exposure to how people are actually reacting to the reality of you, right? It gives you a lot of intelligence in terms of, okay, who can I attract and who I can't? Where is my story lacking?
Yeah.
When I say story, I'm basically talking about where am I lacking in the general way I conduct my life.
Yeah.
Right? So I want to know where all I want to build, or where all I want to improve, where do I learn, etc., etc. And that is for me. My storytelling is a practice for me to open more windows through which I get more intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And it always so happens, and I'm sure you also might have experienced this, when you're trying to tell something to someone, analogies play such a huge role in explaining a point.
Yeah.
The reason for that is analogies are basically a simpler version or more relatable versions of what the core point is.
Yeah.
Imagine your story or your way of putting across a point in itself is an analogy, but it's a more real-time analogy of yourself. Right? Will that make a bigger impact? I think so. I think, yes, it does. Right? This is the longest I've ever spoke in a podcast without you interrupting, which means, you seem to be like mesmerized by my intelligence.
No, don't get too ahead of yourself. I'm just trying not to interrupt you here.
Oh my God, the necessity to put me down, Bogus. I can't believe it.
It's because you try to keep competing.
No, I'm not competing here. I'm obviously ahead of you. Way smarter than you. Intelligence, looks, hair. I can go on. I apologize.
Let's put that to use then.
No, but I want to know your take.
Okay.
Hello. By the way, just conveniently are just making it sound like an interview. But I want to ask your take on what do you find this, because you are a person who takes a lot of interviews or appraisal interviews at the workplace, so many things, right?
Yeah.
What do you see sense in this?
Of course. Yeah. I completely agree with what you said about the importance of storytelling.
Now, can you give me the other side of it? I gave you the side of how as an interviewee.
Yeah.
Can you give me the side of interviewer? But we are just sticking to it. But, when I say interviewer, you're basically telling the side of the story listener.
Yeah.
Right? So can you tell me what is going through your head when you come across someone like me who's not giving you, the straightforward answers, but basically is going off into a story in every question that you ask.
Right. So I have to mention a few things which, color my situation a little bit, because when I when you say I took a lot of interviews, right? Most of them have been interviews of first-time entrants, like college graduates, freshers.
Right.
So they don't really have a lot to offer when it comes to interviews because it's unfamiliar grounds for
Correct.
them. So they're all green, they're all fresh, and very.
Can you explain before you go any further? Can you explain what you mean by they're all green?
It's again.
Like they don't have gray hair. Like what is it that you're expecting?
No, I don't know. It's a Western terminology. I'm not sure why they always refer to rookies as green.
Okay.
I don't know where that comes
The
from.
more ridiculous stuff ever. Like
Yeah.
okay, but yeah.
So what I try to do in those interviews is, by and large, I hardly and I could go through 100 interviews on an outstation recruitment drive, and I would hardly come across one example that really stood out in terms of being aware of themselves and being clear with their thought process and how they communicate.
Right.
The rest of them are lost. And it's not something we can really blame them for because
True.
we were in the same situation.
Yeah, and nobody teaches this stuff.
Yeah, no one
unfortunately.
teaches this, unfortunately, and that's the reason why we're also lost and we lose years.
Remind me after you complete your answer because I want to tell an interesting story.
Okay.
So tell me.
Yeah. So where I used my sense of storytelling and empathy, as you said, is I used to look at body language, the way they were communicating, and I used to ascertain their competence by what they were saying in the interview. Not so much by what they were saying because as freshers, they didn't have much to say. But I used to ask them more personal questions and about situations in their life and how they
Went about it. Right.
And then I noticed how they answer it, in their words, also in their behavior and the facial expressions. And usually I'm able to gauge at the end of a 20-minute conversation if this person would work hard given instructions.
Right.
Because that is then one category of a good employee.
Right.
That at least if you're given instructions, you're competent to deliver on those instructions.
Just follow the lead.
Yeah. Then I see people who may not really work too hard, but the laziness is what fuels their imagination, and they tend to come up with clever solutions.
Hacks of
hacks.
getting the work done.
And so we want some of those too.
Right.
You need to have some of those too. And then there are people who are a combination of both. Like they work hard, they're smart, and they're very clear.
And that's a dangerous combination, right? Like imagine a
Depends
guy,
on how they use it. But
but the trait in itself, I find that to be a very, very, when I say dangerous, it's not in a negative connotation.
Yeah.
But that's like the best case scenario.
It's very potent.
Right.
So when I see this under the surface and they're not really giving it to me proactively and I'm seeing it under the surface, I know at the back of my mind what the requirement of my organization is, that they hope to close these many positions at the end of this drive, and they're investing a lot in having us go there and
True.
hotel stay and all that stuff. So I look at, even if someone is really polished and really charming and charismatic, if I sense that under the surface that is just packaging and there's no meat to the bone there, then I'm not recruiting.
You're not sold.
I'm not sold.
Right.
And he could have done everything good by the book.
Right.
But I'm not going to sign off on that person.
Right.
So usually it comes down to very individual ways of
presenting themselves,
judging the situation as well.
Yeah.
And that's basically how I went about it. But I did use my own sense of storytelling as well and empathy to understand the human aspect of where these college graduates were coming from. How serious were they, and how responsible they were at this stage in their life. And the most responsible ones usually get through.
And so thanks for the answer, by the way. You didn't still answer my question of how do you...
No, you asked me to remind you about something once.
Yeah. So, So when you're saying the answer of... when you're telling me your side of the story, the thing that stuck me was the confidence levels that you're evaluating.
Yeah.
Right? And the two parts of it. I mean, it's a very interesting point because, a lot of people break in a pressure situation, right?
Yeah.
And it happens to everyone. It happened to me also. I'm sure it happened to you
we
at
all
some
learn
point.
From,
we all learn from that. But the thing is, how else this storytelling aspect helps you is because it is your story. You're that bit more free. Right? And when you put a person in that situation and say like, hey, just tell me your story. Like, tell me whatever it is. then, and say as an interviewer, if in this case you're a person who's not judging them for whatever it is, right? Give them a platform. So confidence is something that comes out of what is closer to you, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, like whatever is close to you and whatever you feel is a fact and nothing can like change that.
Yeah.
It gives you more confidence in expressing that.
Right.
So therefore, storytelling also helps you to put yourself or put yourself in a comfort zone, even in a pressure situation, So that's one part of it. The second part of it, why this storytelling thing becomes so important in today's day and age, in fact, and to a point where I actually feel that I'll tell you the story after I tell this point. A lot of people are smart out there.
Oh yeah.
There are a lot of smart people, and thanks to the education or the kind of ability to provide education by the average family today, you are exposed to so much of information.
I also think just for our society, the level of adversity that exists, right? That itself sharpens.
Yeah, it puts you through a grind to become smarter, right?
Yeah.
So because of the adversity, because they're all going through that grind, they're becoming smarter. So you have to figure out a way of how do you sell yourself better, right?
Yeah.
So all these things into consideration. Now, if you look at the number of startup ideas that are coming up, number of people who want to become entrepreneurs, the one thing that I've seen is an idea in itself doesn't sell.
Yes.
It's just like, hey, I want to make something come to your doorsteps.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my idea. And you're like, okay. And then you start evaluating the idea. But say for suppose, I tell a story about why I want that to happen. Right? I tell us take any great successful, startups that have happened in the last 10 years.
Right.
Everything has a story.
Yeah.
Everything is told through a story, right?
Yeah.
And those are the ideas which changed the world technically. So that's another aspect of it. Like how else you can use storytelling, or why else storytelling is important is you make every thought of yours as a lucrative proposition.
Okay.
And the story that I wanted to tell was, I went to this fresher hiring, the college hiring, campus hiring, this thing.
Right.
And it was basically day 7 or day 8. So all the cream crop was taken up. So there was the rest of the people. And nothing against them, right? They were smart kids.
Yeah.
And even before I went into the room for the interviews, the placement guy came and told me that you might not find a lot of talent. And I was like a little taken aback. And this is your college. Like, why do you say that?
Yeah.
I'll not name the college or the person. But what the funny thing was that he came and told me that you will not find because, and it's an MBA college, right? And this is masters, by the way.
Oh.
So these are master grads.
It's a pretty pitiful thing for him to say that for an MBA college. Right? I was thinking it was an engineering college.
No, it was an MBA. It's a proper MBA college.
Okay.
And then I asked him, why do you say that? And he was like, because these are the first generation MBA grads of their families. Okay. And I thought, okay, this makes it interesting because, the parents of these kids were either guys who just like came from tier 2 cities, just settled down in Hyderabad or, in the main city.
Yeah.
Or they were guys who were running kirana stores, or it basically gave me the demographic of it.
Right.
And then I went through the interview, and obviously, communication was a challenge.
Yeah.
But I was not ready to look at that because I know where they come from.
Yeah.
So I was looking at people as to, okay, how do they express themselves?
Exactly.
Right? I just want somebody to express themselves freely.
Yeah.
Potato, long story short, there were not many guys who really caught my eye. So I went back when I wrapped up everything, went back and he was like, give me a feedback or whatever. I said, I don't blame any of these kids for being who they are.
Yeah.
Right? Because of the fact of what you told me, that they are the first generation, of their family to actually come to a point of masters, right? But what I blame is I don't know what you're doing in your so-called, placement training.
Yeah.
Right? And I asked them, what is their placement training? And it was so horrible.
Yeah.
It was so peripheral. Basically, what they did was they made them by heart answers for the top 50 interview questions that are asked in an interview, which is why sales or why HR or why this job. And the ridiculous part was they never trained them for the follow-up question. For instance, so it was obviously for a sales position that I was hiring. And I asked why sales, and there's a person who told that because I like talking to people. Okay. I was like, fair enough. Then why not journalism? You will talk to people day in, day out, right?
Yeah.
Why not marketing? Because that's your job. Like your job is to talk to people.
Right.
Why only sales? And that's where the conversation ended.
Yeah.
They don't have an answer beyond that.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to get more into how these guys are trained. And unfortunately, there is no concept of selling their skill set.
Yeah, the thing that he told you about, hey, don't expect too much.
Which in
it's
itself
not
is
a rare
shocker.
Thing. It is not a rare thing.
Yeah.
It is shocking how many colleges, how many placement people of how many colleges in India would say something like that.
It doesn't show, and I know I'm being biased here, but it doesn't show any capability mismatch from the candidates or the students.
Yeah.
But it shows a huge incompetence from the college front.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they should take more. If your goal is to get your students placed,
Right.
your job is to make them ready for the corporate world.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include cracking interviews.
Yeah.
Right? And there is, like you said, there is always that 80-20. No matter which college you are, there are 20% of the students who are top performing,
Yeah.
who are more eligible for a job. And they're obviously taken by the cream, corporates.
Yeah.
But the other people, you need to at least make them, give them enough tools to fight this competition, right?
Right.
And that's where I find storytelling to be a huge, huge tool. Because no matter where you come from, what your skills are, what your background, all that takes a backseat the moment you tell your story.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you look at all the media out there also, they sell stories.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is they go in the pursuit to sell an interesting story, right? They go as far from reality as possible.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Where I feel you don't have to do that.
This brings me to the question of, okay, now I'm always trying to think of from the perspective of someone who's coming across this concept, as something new as a result of listening to this.
Right.
So then it comes to the question of how, okay, I've identified that there's a problem I have, that I don't seem to be processing things in terms of stories.
Right.
And I understand the importance of it now. But then what are the tools? How do I start from zero? To get to a point where I'm well versed with.
You won't believe what helped me.
What helped you?
Daydreaming. I'm not even kidding.
Okay.
Like daydreaming about myself actually helped me tell better stories. I know it is very ludicrous to put it out.
Do you mean like daydreaming about your future state or something like that?
In general, like again, I will go back to the measure of man.
Okay.
Where there is so much of importance given to me. It was my pursuit was always about how do I make myself more interesting.
God, we just keep going back to our previous episodes. They're so good.
Major plugin.
They're so good.
Amazing.
Guys, listen to the previous episodes.
Yeah. There's so much of meat to the bone.
You're saying.
Yeah. So, but you get the point, right?
Yeah.
Like there is so much of emphasis of, I want people to be interested in me. I want to be the center of attraction.
Yes.
I want to be on the stage all the time.
Right.
Or whatever that is.
Yeah.
I started seeing stages in every part of my life. There's a family function, I saw a stage there. There is work in my workplace. I saw a stage where I can be a performer of some sort or the other.
Yeah.
And that just helped me to, when you go into that state, right, of daydreaming of being the best version of yourself. And this is something, by the way, Kevin Hart keeps saying that.
Okay.
That always think of the best version of yourself.
Right.
What do you see is the best version of yourself? The first glitch in the ThyGap podcast recordings. The production unit was weak. Hence, we almost lost whatever we have recorded for the last 1 hour. Apologies for the delay. Back to transmission. Bogus, that's your watch.
So, Brut, for someone who's looking at this from the outside,
Yeah.
and they now understand the importance of storytelling, they understand why it is important and why they should be picking up, and
Right.
they have an intention to pick it up.
Right.
But what would you say to someone who's at 0 and they want to pick it up, and what kind of tools or how would they go about improving on this?
You won't believe what helped me, Bogus. Can you guess what helped me in building this particular skill of storytelling?
Your usual trail of lies and deceit.
Oh, sweet Lord. And
And
don't reveal too much, but just like slyly put it in.
your snaky behavior.
You are going further away, but let me help you out with the answer.
Okay.
The one thing that helped me a lot in building stories or telling things in the form of a story is daydreaming.
Okay.
Like you won't even believe it. I know it looks ridiculous to tell that daydreaming actually helps you. It's always put as by so many people that daydreaming is bad for you, or like
Yeah.
don't be the victim of your Sheikh Chili ke sapne mat dekh and all
Right,
that.
right.
But daydreaming actually helped me out, and it essentially was me thinking about myself. And I go back to Measure of Men here, and I can't help but, because it's so related to that, it's just, I feel it's the next step.
Yeah.
Is once you know what you're made of, right? What your worth is, what your capability is, then you won't get an opportunity every day to showcase them.
Exactly.
Right? But daydreaming is a place which kind of helps you simulate
Right.
that scenarios in your
Right.
head where you can be like the best version. And it's a safe place to make mistakes, right? So
Yeah.
you're kind of critiquing every thought or every decision you take in
Yeah.
that scenario.
Yeah.
And when that day comes where you actually realize that, hey, this is exactly what I was thinking about, of where I want to be or the kind of situation I want to be,
Right.
you already have that feeling that, I've been here
Yeah.
mentally. So now this is the real shit. So I know what has to be done. It's a matter of execution.
Yeah.
And that's how you kind of, keep growing or honing that skill of storytelling, because you told this story in your head multiple times.
Right.
And it's just like reading. I don't know. I don't know how many people had this in the school, but you know how when you initially start talking a new language, they say that thinking in that language in your head helps you learn the language faster.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost the same thing. It's very kind of, I am loss of words again, but it's very similar to that.
Right.
Fuck. I forgot similar, guys. That's what Bogus does to me. Like his stare kind of makes me forget
You do it
language.
to yourself.
No, but it's similar to that. You get that, right? I mean, you get what I'm saying,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
When you are telling that story multiple times, you have so many versions of yourself
Right.
that you ultimately... So the goal is to basically go to the best version,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what we are all trying to do here. Like
Right.
whatever we do in life, we want to do it the best way possible.
Yeah.
And one thing I also want to put out there is that best version is according to you.
Yeah.
It's not according to what your parents think, what the society wants you to be, or how your girlfriend looks at you, or all this,
Which
right?
in
Or
most-
your boyfriend.
Which in most cases is what you think society wants you to be, what you think your parents want out of you.
Yeah.
It's not really from their side as well. It is your assumption.
Right.
So it is better rather to just focus on what's the best version of yourself according to you.
Yeah. So you have to build that image of yourself,
Yeah.
which is I think the more tougher challenge.
It is, yeah.
Right? Because you are going into a very uncertain area of no reference.
Yeah.
And we are all victims of reference, right? The moment we have a reference, it's easier for us to kind of like, replicate that.
Yeah.
Or try to replicate that.
Yeah.
But because there is no reference of the best version of you, it is a lot of guess game.
Right.
Right? It's a lot of assumptions.
Right.
But at the same time, that's what is going to help you to actually put yourself in challenging positions, right?
Okay.
So that's the tool that I have used,
Okay.
and that benefited me. But there is no said law,
Yeah.
or there is no rule book for this.
Different strokes. for
Different strokes.
folks.
You have your own. You can make your own.
Yeah, whatever
path.
works for you.
And I've seen the most conventional thing is writing a diary, or writing something on a piece of paper.
Right.
The moment you get up in the morning, I mean, I've seen a lot of successful people do this.
Yeah.
That they get up in the morning, the first thing they write down is what are the things that they want to do in the best way possible. And for all I care, they must be thinking about these things when you're going to the bed before night.
Yeah.
The night before.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, there are gazillion ways of doing it.
Yeah. And what writing does is it helps in organization of your thoughts.
Right.
Because there's only so much faster that you can actually write. You're limited by your physical speed. So now the speed of thought in your head is being tempered through this bottleneck of your physical speed of output.
Right.
And that is helping you take some time and come up with better ways of expressing yourself in writing. And that is in turn organizing your thoughts better. And the exercise of writing regularly, even if you're writing a to-do list every day or a shopping list every day, whatever it is, but just that exercise helps you helps you find a way to objectify or articulate yourself better.
And then, what is the final aspect of writing, which I feel is amazing and which happens so naturally, is you won't write a sentence till you are absolutely convinced about it in your head.
Yeah.
How many times have you picked up a pen and a paper and you want to write down something, but you just hold on to it for some time. You don't immediately start writing gibberish, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Your mind doesn't allow you to do that.
Yeah.
They're this is not on par. You have a better way because you're writing it down, right? You allow me some time to put it in a better way. Just don't write crudely. So that also helps you reevaluate everything that you're thinking. Right. So that's the reason why I feel diary is also one of the most, popular ways of, basically putting down your story or writing a journal or whatever, because it helps you give a better finished product.
Yeah.
So,
and if I could add to that, the way that I usually follow, especially because we spoke about interviews.
Yeah.
And this could apply to any situation where you're walking into opportunity and you want to come out the winner, right? Having done what was needed,
right?
What helped me usually is I pretend, I just think I'm an actor. This is a scene, And what happens with that is the advantage I get with that is I can put all my nervousness aside, all my stage fright, and because the thing with actors is
no wonder you chose podcast as a medium,
right?
You have stage fear, so you want to be anonymous behind a mic.
No, stage fright was just an example for others.
Oh.
But it even helps with that because you become more free because if you're acting, you're not really being yourself.
Right.
You're being something else.
Right. You kind of build a shield.
It's a liberation of some sort.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah, I can be free being something else.
Right.
So I like to pretend that I'm the most confident, I'm the best candidate that day or for that job ever.
Yeah.
And how would that person talk?
Yeah.
Forget about how I would actually stumble through my interview.
Right.
Now I'm thinking about how would the best, the smartest, the most charismatic candidate would walk into that room, would meet the interviewer's eyes and talk to them like human
smile
beings.
Across, give a firm shake hand.
Have a positive disposition.
Right.
Basically everything that we think a leading man or the hero would do in this situation.
Right.
I would just usually take leaf out of that book and just pretend to an extent where once I'm out the interview room, I have no idea what happened inside.
Right.
But I'm just waiting to now hear whether they accepted me or not.
Yeah.
And usually more often than not, it works.
It works
in my favor.
Because you're, it works because you are confident about it.
Yeah.
Most of the times, it's basically your conviction in the story that goes a story is a medium of transmitting conviction, right? So the more you are convinced about the story, it's easier for the other person to also get convinced.
Rubs off on the other guy,
Right.
Yeah.
So in the same note, I also want, now that we are talking so much about storytelling and all, I just want to ask you one last question, Bogus.
Sure.
What is the best story you ever heard?
Okay.
In your 48 years of life?
In my 62 years of existence.
Yeah.
The best story I ever heard also happened to be the most uneventful story I ever heard, strangely. Because back in school, I had an English professor called Mishra sir, late great. He was physically disabled. So he used those crutches to move around. And he was a very eccentric kind of character. He was a senior citizen back then itself.
Right.
And we were kids. The advantage we had with our institution was that we had university level professors coming down and teaching kids.
This was in school?
This was in my school.
Okay.
And
you went to school?
Yeah, contrary to popular belief. But So he and I used to always have a standoffish equation. He used to not really like what I was about, and I was not really giving him too much bhav.
Yeah.
Even though he deserves whatever credibility. And he used to be very eccentric. I remember he used to catch me dozing off in his class. He used to make me stand up and ask me in front of everyone, why is this table not a chair? And why is this chair not a table? Tell me now. Tell me, or you get out of the class.
Yeah, because the chair is where I'm sitting.
Yeah,
The table is where
I'm
I'm
half
sleeping.
drowsy.
Yeah.
And so when he asks me a question like that, he's expecting a smart answer. I am doubting his sanity. So
Clash of wits.
I'm looking at him like, are you seriously expecting me to give an answer to that kind of a question?
Yeah.
You just caught me sleeping. Why not just be done with it? Just throw me out.
Right.
Why this drama,
Right.
But then when in a good mood, he used to go away from subject material.
Right.
And he started narrating a story
Huh.
of when he was a kid, and as a bunch of friends, he and his friends went to play under the shade of a tree, and they plucked fruits from that tree.
Right.
And there was a fight that broke out between the friends. And basically there was no high stakes, there was no suspense, but it was one of the most thrilling stories I ever heard. It was the most uneventful thing. That was it. It was just a story about how a bunch of boys went to a tree, played under the shade, all this happened.
Right.
That's it. And we all, a class of 35 boys who were usually noisy,
Right.
we were all gripped, we were all silent, and we were following every word of his story.
Yeah.
And then I realized something else is going on here, because if I evaluate the story on its merit,
Right.
it is one of the worst stories I ever heard. In terms of plot,
Right.
there's nothing in this
Right.
to keep me engaged. But why was I so highly engaged in what he was saying
Huh.
when there was nothing to it? And that was the first instance I remember where I understood the value or the importance, of storytelling.
Right.
And so that was basically my answer.
Yeah, I think one of the best stories are always which are not told to you but was intended for you. In a way. Like
Okay.
that's something that always catches my attention.
Not sure where you stole that bit of smart phrase from, but I'm sure it was not yours.
Father.
Of course.
But so my story is told by my father, which is pretty exciting.
Okay.
And it was just that phase where, I was in college and hating it, obviously. And not a single ounce of me was even interested in what was supposed to be done in a college.
Right.
And my mother and father, basically both my parents, were trying every way possible to get me excited about my engineering.
Right.
Which was not working. And then at this point, my father once just walks into my room and he sees that my room is a mess. Typical, college guy's room. Clothes on the table, clothes on the chair, everywhere, books here and there. So basically
disgusting as you are.
Yes, it's basically a representation of myself.
Yeah.
And then my father very calmly opens my cupboard and he sees that everything is neatly packed.
Okay.
Right, like the iron clothes are in their place and the whole thing. And he started telling me a story. He started basically, not a story, but he started telling me something about how he had a classmate who was very aloof, and he had a way of approaching exams.
Okay.
And basically the story went that he's this smart ass, right? He's this super genius kind of a student who never gave attention in class, who looked always like aloof, always like going around speaking to people, not really giving a shot.
Right.
And then by the time the exams came, this guy would vanish.
Okay.
Right? Like nobody would meet him.
Right.
And just a day before the exam, right, he would again come to everybody and say let's go for a movie.
Okay.
So his ritual was he would go for a second show in the night, right before the day of the actual exam.
Right.
And the indication was if so-and-so person basically goes for a movie before the exam, that means he's going to top.
Right.
That's his way of validating that I've prepared the best way possible and there's nothing more for me to do but to chill.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to go back to it or whatever. And he described me, that person. I know him as my father's friend later on.
Okay.
In my version.
Right.
But the way my father described me, I knew he was describing me, not his friend.
Okay.
He was telling that, he was the same. Everybody liked him. He had this flair for doing extracurricular activities, always was looking out for something that could be done differently.
So far, it doesn't sound like you at all.
Yeah, because
Everybody liked him. Please.
Everybody likes me, Bogus. You're just
Yeah.
jealous of the fact that I get it so
Yeah.
naturally. I get love from everyone just like that without even asking.
In your
But
dreams.
potato, long story short,
Right.
when I was telling this, I was like, I realized at some point, okay, now he's talking about me, right? That whole, I need attention, I need people to listen to me kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fine, where are you going with this? And my father basically turned the whole, context as my room. And he said, look at what you're trying to show people, whereas what you have
What
in
you
the
are
cupboard.
on the inside.
In the inside, like how your brain works
Yeah.
to what you're trying to convey. And I understand that, you have this whole thing about not trying to come across as a smart guy or like,
Yeah.
orderly guy
You're
or whatever.
Goodwill hunting this shit.
Goodwill hunting this shit. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Now that you told that Parcel section, I remember. But
Yeah.
when he said that, that was the instance where I realized how do you connect dots in a story, right? That was the day I felt like, hey, you know what? Because of the way my father went about it.
So you're saying how he connected. He started off with his friend,
Right.
and then that sort of sounded like you, and now he connected that whole thing to how your room.
Yeah, I'm
looked
not I didn't explain it in detail, but basically he painted the picture of my lifestyle
right,
through how his lifestyle was in college. So
Right.
that was the relating string,
and
right?
also to how your room is looking like now.
which is later on,
Right.
Which later on, when I said was the whole deal about it,
Yeah.
he went into a completely different angle, and he basically compared the overall life
Mm-hmm.
that a college guy has to how that reflects in his room,
Right.
So I've not explained it in detail, but you get the point.
But
right?
I get the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
he spanned a course of like 20-25 years in that arc of his story.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and he told look at him, and he's a successful person, obviously. My father's friend, right? Very strong entrepreneur, got a lot of goodwill around him.
Right.
He had his ups and downs, but still, you can make out that, when you meet him, you know that this is a smart guy. Sorted guy, right? So that's the time where I actually realized, hey, you know what? This is how you tell something to people, right? Even if it is your problem, you don't go across to someone and say, dude, I have a problem with you. I hate your face. But there are ways of telling it, right?
Yeah.
And yes, as much as I'm a blunt person and I like to be blunt and to the point about it, but the art in itself, right, of telling everything in a form of story, so that you remember it also. So it's like it's been 10 years and I still remember that story.
Exactly.
Right?
It's not just this is how you tell this to people. It's also this is how people would really understand.
Exactly. And that leaves a mark.
Exactly.
If it's a bad story, it's a scar.
Yeah.
But if it's a good story,
A mark.
right? And that's what you want to do with yourself as a person. You want to leave marks across as you go in life, right? You want people to remember you in the best way possible. And that's how you tell a story. And it doesn't just stop with you daydreaming or you writing a journal and thinking of the best version.
Yeah.
But your actions should slowly start getting in tune with that storyline. That's a bigger game, right? At the end of the day, when you die, what you leave is a story. And that's what great guys are left with. They become immortal with their whole life story.
Yeah.
Not saying that you have to become a biographer at the end of the day, but at least in your vicinity, you make that impact through you living a life of a story that you've written for yourself.
True.
Right?
True.
And as much as we don't know, it creates a lot of value for you as an individual at the end of the day. When you hone that skill of telling stories, it helps you break a lot of barriers, fight a lot of, like you mentioned, you play a character. When you come to that stage of hey, I'm a character which has to be played. There are a lot of inhibitions that kind of take a backseat. Right? So that's the perfect. There are a lot of stories that my father tells which I feel are borderline perfect. He's a great storyteller, but unfortunately, I don't think I got his skill.
Okay.
That was not the fair part of life. But that's about it. That was my favorite story.
I feel like many of the other topics that we picked on so far in our episodes. This one also is an open-ended one that we might revisit in future.
Absolutely.
If we find there other
ThyGap
aspects
podcast story itself will be something that we might be telling someday.
Yeah, and if we find other aspects of it that we think might add value,
Right.
we'll for sure come across. But I just want to say for anyone listening, if you haven't heard our episodes on Measure of Man, it is very, very closely related to this
Yes.
topic as well. So please make sure you go ahead and
True that.
listen to that, because that is at the very bottom.
There's a foundational
That's a
step.
foundational kind of step
Yeah.
over which you can explore and improve on these other aspects.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the conclusion, Brut, of our episode on storytelling for now.
Yes, storytelling about yourself.
Awesome. ThyGap, subscribe
And share.
and share.
Yeehaw! Okay, so now that everybody has shared the podcast, Bogus, it's time for us to share our parcel.
Oh, yeah.
Swooping into the all-new parcel section of
Brand
the
new.
13th episode. Brand new. We are just unboxing it right now. So are you ready?
I'm ready as ever.
Very good. I'll start then. So my parcel section, my recommendation for this episode is a 1970s sitcom, which they claim was the father of all sitcoms that followed.
Oh, how
The name
exquisite.
of the sitcom is The Odd Couple.
Okay.
It's a fantastic sitcom. You'll find a lot of these episodes on YouTube. I don't know how many people have actually seen this, but it is done by Jack Klugman and Tony Randall, two extremely great actors of back in the day, the American actors.
Uh-huh.
The premise of the sitcom is very similar to any other sitcoms that came, and you can say it's Friends or How I Met Your Mother,
Oh.
The Big Bang Theory, any of this, right?
Okay.
It's set up in an apartment, and Jack Klugman and Tony Randall are two divorced men
Right.
who basically got kicked out of their house and are staying together in that apartment
Okay.
at New York, right? The funny part is Tony Randall is a fashion photographer who has an OCD for neatness. Okay. He is extremely neat, extremely ethical. He doesn't cheat women and all that, which is very contradictory to his profession, right?
Okay.
And on the contrary, Jack Klugman is a journalist, is a reporter, a column writer, you can say,
Right.
who is absolute slob, right?
Okay.
He eats in his bed. He's always a mess. There is like wherever he goes, the trail of mess follows.
Right.
And how things kind of happen at their apartment, like the different kind of scenarios. The reason I'm telling that is at that time in the 70s, when the show kind of started getting telecasted, right? It became like the foundation principle of how a sitcom should be designed.
Okay.
And one of the first few sitcoms that went about it is Frasers and your Seinfelds, who kind of adopted ideas from The Odd Couple.
Okay.
Right? Where the concept of,
So this was a comedy.
it's a comedy, it's a pure, and it's like a raw comedy, right? It is, Jack Klugman is a fantastic comic actor. And Tony Randall with the straight face has a brilliant, delivery of comedy also in his own way.
Right.
So it is a good mixture of sarcasm, dry comedy, and situational comedy, which is why it's sitcom, right? Sitcoms are situational comedies.
comedies.
So that's my recommendation. That is The Odd Couple 1970. You can also find it as Neil Simpson's The Odd Couple. That is also one of the official names that it started off with.
Oh,
So it's a great recommendation. You should also check it out. I know you didn't see it for
I have
your
not
life.
watched
A
it.
lot of movies also came out of that concept,
Okay.
right? I think Jack Lemmon and there was another person which was a
Yeah,
feature
yeah, yeah,
film
yeah. There was
based on
Jack
this
Lemmon
idea.
hits.
Yeah.
Of that time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's called The Odd Couple. The name of the movie is also The Odd Couple.
Okay.
It's about two guys taking a road journey.
Jack Lemmon's The Apartment.
Jack Lemmon, he's there in a lot. One of the claim to fame movies of his was The 12 Angry Men
Right.
and The Great Race. Again, very veteran actor, but I'm not going deep into it like you, Bogus.
Okay.
And that is my recommendation for the 13th episode of ThyGap podcast, The Odd Couple.
Which means odd couple, odd recommendation for an odd episode, which means probably you should skip it. Especially because Brut is recommending it. I mean,
Now starts the history class, guys. Bogus, what's your recommendation?
my parcel for today is a movie that released in 2002 called City of God. It's a Brazilian movie. The original title is Cidade de Deus.
Repeat the
which I
title.
think
can you
is the
please?
way it's pronounced. I'm not sure. It was directed by two people, a Brazilian, both Brazilians called Fernando Meirelles and Katia Lund. Settle down. And that's just the name they have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Fernando Meirelles and Katia Lund directed this movie together. It's based on the slums of Rio de Janeiro, and the ghettos or the slums in Brazil, they're called favelas.
Right. Hurry up.
So this story is based on one such favela called City of God in Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
And it's based on the story of one boy called Rocket.
Got it.
And he is the only straight guy in that slum. And his dream is to, his passion is photography. And his dream is to be a photographer for the local newspaper. He wants to have a clean career, because what usually goes down in these favelas is it's all drug trade. It's all boys looking to get rich fast, get guns fast, and there's a lot of death.
Oh.
So it's the story of Rocket, how he goes through, how he navigates the dangerous everyday life in the favelas. Which, to just give an example, the movie opens on a chicken. It opens on the POV of a chicken that's running around on the in the favela streets, and the boys are chasing it around, and it becomes like a convoluted, long drawn out chase between multiple boys from different directions. Ultimately, they catch the chicken, and that chicken is toast. Quite literally. That kind of explains or metaphorically shows you what the life of any victim is in such a favela. So they shot this entire movie with handheld camcorders.
Camera. Okay.
And so the minute it starts, this movie, the pacing is so intense, it never lets up. Like, you are always at the edge of your seat. I'm always shocked at how well this movie was made in such a shoestring budget. Not to mention its amazing original soundtrack, full of great bossa nova tracks from Brazil. So it was my introduction into the genre of bossa nova as well. So I really recommend City of God for anyone looking to be really excited and thrilled through a movie. That's my recommendation.
Wow. Guys, wow, this is undoubtedly one of the fastest recommendations of Bogus. And that's about it, guys. I think we've done a great job.
Yeah.
And I also know who should be the first listener for the podcast for the storytelling skills. Bogus, please listen to our podcast to improve your storytelling skills.
Right.
And
right.
And while you do that, Bogus, ThyGap podcast. Subscribe.
And share.
And share.
Hey, thanks for listening. You can follow this podcast on Spotify to get notified of new episodes every Thursday. We're also on Apple Podcasts for those of you who have partaken in the forbidden fruit. If you liked what you heard, leave us a 5-star rating and a comment. Say anything like the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. A rating and a comment really helps us out. It's free, and I'm told that's a great price. But enough about us, huh? Tell us about yourself. Leave us a comment. Our Twitter is @ThyGap, and we are _ThyGap on Instagram.